Hello, and welcome to Friend Friday with Hey Matt Fratt. Today's special guest is Matthew Trump. I met Matthew at EdCamp Department of Education this summer. Super neat guy. We partnered on EdCamp Creative a few weeks ago. He's just awesome, and Matthew is the Dean of Faculty and an upper school science teacher at York Country Day School in York, Pennsylvania. And he, as Dean of Faculty, Matthew, what do you do to support professional growth of faculty?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Matt. So the one thing that I think is sort of most important to support growth among teachers is really just to encourage teachers to share. It's one of the things, you mentioned that we met at EdCamp, and I love EdCamp for that reason, is that, that's the whole mantra of the EdCamp, is that teachers get out there, they share what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, and learn from one another. So with that being said, that's one of the things I've tried to now bring back to my school from my EdCamp experience. And a couple of examples, we have a faculty member who did some summer work on restorative justice. And so as a result, we have, we've always had an honor council at our school. Here are cases where, academic integrity, disciplinary, kind of when students make bad decisions, they go before our honor council. Well, this teacher took that information learned on restorative justice over the summer and really implemented that here at school, and has now really revamped that process of having an honor council. But more than that, he's also done a lot of work with the idea of circles, which is something that comes out of the responsive classroom sort of philosophy of education. And that's something that's been going on in our lower school, our pre-K through 5th grade classes for a while now. But this particular faculty member has shared that with everyone, and we now have introduced circles into our 6th through 12th grade classrooms as well.
Now, circles are so hot right now, Matthew.
Right.
What is in nuts and bolts? Like, I love the concept. I've pitched it to people here, and they like the idea. But how do you scaffold up to it? How did you implement it?
Right. So the big thing with the circle is there's not a lot of scaffolding that really has to happen, especially with middle school and high school students. I mean, they kind of get the process. But the important thing is to have an open forum where students are willing to share things that, in a traditional classroom setting, they might not, because they'll be embarrassed they had the wrong answer, or to, think about what their peers might think of them for making a statement or asking a question. So one of the important things in the circle process is establishing sort of the rules of the group. And a lot of that is non-judgmental, being open to other students, and having to be a real caring environment. One big thing that's actually helped with that is we have some sort of talking piece. It's an old school kind of method of discussion, but unless you're holding that thing, you're just being in a listening mode, and that, especially with our chatty middle school and high school students, that's really helped that process along. It's really work on those listening skills as much as the sharing skills. So one way I've actually implemented my chemistry classes is just as a student feedback forum. So instead of a Google form or a written survey or something like that, we just get in a circle, and the prompt is simply like, "How's class going?" And typically the first one or two students will say, "Oh, everything's great, et cetera, et cetera." And then you'll get that one kid who's just like, "Mr. Trump, I'm not gonna lie, chemistry's terrible, I don't get it." And then all of a sudden, boom, doors are open, great conversation happens, and it's really been a good process.
Does the circle go around does it go around? Does it go across? Do you raise your hand? How does the circle pass? How does the stick pass?
Typically we go around, and I always pick a random person to start. And as I'm introducing the prompt, I always notion to them that I'm going to start with student X. And so they get a little time to think of their response to the prompt as I'm thinking it, and then we just go around the circle one way or the other.
Does I've talked about this with my administrator, and I think common sense says you don't start with talking circles like, Johnny and Joni have punched each other. Like, that's not.
No.
Even though the community is harmed by, I know the concept. The concept is the community is harmed by it, so the whole community comes together. But I'm imagining for like your chemistry class, like not individual problems, but community. Is that a good place to start, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say even necessarily prompting it and setting it up as, I know there are problems. It's more of an open feedback. Like, I'm looking for anything. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it something we want to work on? Is it something we can grow from that? So yeah, the prompt isn't necessarily always just jumping straight to a particular issue we might be having in the class.
So it can just be it can be any prompt that you want. It doesn't have to be problem solving.
Exactly, right.
Any other supporting student or professional growth of faculty that you like to touch on?
Right. I mean, basically supporting teachers to go out and take classes, whether that's, attending a conference in that kind of format or traditional, going to coursework. We just had a faculty member just to defend her doctoral thesis. And so I've got a new doctor on board. So that's been a lot of fun. And then also having those individuals who, the school is helping support by paying for some of their grad work, making sure those teachers come back and share with the rest of the faculty what it is they're studying, what they learned from their experience. So it's kind of a traditional one, but it's traditional and been around because it works. So that's a really good one. The other one is just generating a culture and environment of just constant growth. So, that's the one thing, we think of with our students, that we're always asking them to learn more. And once they reach a certain level, we set the goal higher because we, want them to be these, quote unquote, lifelong learners. So the same thing goes for our teachers, just to sort of embrace that culture of continually learning. Because, we're educators are all nerds, right? And we just love learning new things. And just to have a forum to share that with faculty is really important. And the one problem that I always face as an administrator, my administrative role, is that teachers always say, we never have time to share. Right? We want to share. So one of the things I've been doing recently is that we now have EdCamp style faculty meetings where there's no official prompts as we get together. We literally do the idea board, session board, and teachers will come up with their topics. They'll go into their classrooms, and every 20 minutes switch rooms, and sort of it's like an EdCamp Express, if you will. We spend an hour, maybe 2 hours doing it, and the feedback I've received from our teachers has been phenomenal. And on, I'd say maybe a bi-weekly basis, I get some teachers saying, when we're doing our next EdCamp meeting. So that's been really good. And I think just having that happen every now and then in our school community has really embraced that idea of teachers just get out there and at lunch or in the faculty room making copies. All of a sudden they're talking about what's going on in their classrooms and what they can do to improve. So it's been really
fascinating. Good. So the internal EdCamp is one I've gotten approval from my principal, but I've never done it yet. I love the idea. It sounds like you've got some expertise in it. So I have a few questions like how often, two things, how often and what are people? Are they sharing out at conferences? Are they sharing out, like what are people sharing on?
Right, so it's fascinating. So first part of your question, I'd say quarterly is probably the most you'd want to do. Even though I do have some teachers that just want to do that more frequently, I still have the group of teachers who are like, no, just send me the information I need to know in an email. Like, I don't need to be there. Like, I'm going home, that sort of thing, which is totally fine. So I'd say quarterly is probably a good schedule, if you will, to host something like that. As far as what teachers include in their session topics, I mean, it runs the gamut. Some are about assessment, some are about particular issues we might be having at school. So say we're having, some social problems in our lunch line between some middle schoolers. It's like, well, and one session might be like, what can we do as a school to, make sure that we have positive interactions in places like that where there aren't always teachers there watching, which get into some great conversations. We have a lot of questions about rigor and homework. Those are, frequent ones that teachers want to discuss. Sometimes I think a session came up about our syllabi. Like, what should a syllabus look like? And should we have uniformity among our syllabi in the high school classes? So yeah, I mean, just like a traditional EdCamp that I know you've been to, what, 25 plus of them or so?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the ideas are just all over the place.
And I like that when we do it, I think our principal wants to do it like, when you get the subjects ahead of time, you're going like purist, like you
oh, yeah.
on the fly.
Right.
That's awesome. And wouldn't be Thanksgiving without the traditional Thanksgiving question. What are you thankful for these days?
Right. So the big thing that I'm really thankful for, we've been reflecting on this a little bit at our school. We did this great, tree. A bunch of middle school students painted this big brown tree that had no leaves on it in our one hallway. And they asked people to just put Post-it notes up there, things for which they're thankful. And one of the Post-it notes I put up there, and in this really cool project that we shared, was just the idea that people are willing to share and people are willing to just pitch in. And so, like I said before, like a lot of our community members do that, not only on the teacher side, but also on the student side. I love it when students just like embrace that challenge of confronting something new and just going for it. Whether or not they might fail, they might succeed, they're going to learn from it, right? So, a couple of really neat things that have happened recently. So I teach advanced biology this year. One of the things that we do in that class is that every student once a semester presents a peer-reviewed journal article from a scientific journal. Something that not like I, as a high school student, had no idea what a peer-reviewed journal was. And all of a sudden I got to college and they said, all right, make sure you cite 3 journals. I was like, three what? Like, am I getting like Darwin's like handwritten journal from the Beagle? Like, what is a journal? So I was like, all right, we've got to, get students to read these things. And, the vocabulary and the science is a lot of times over their head, but they can get something out of it. And for instance, I had this student today just present a paper. She's a ballet dancer. So when she started looking for a paper, she's like, just search for ballet and see what's out there. She found this awesome paper about the neurobiology of ballet dancers and how music imprints in their brains. And the methods, they use this functional MRI and had ballet dancers listening to certain classical music pieces and then wiggling their toes at certain rates. And it was really fascinating. And she just like got totally engrossed in this. Now, all of a sudden, this student is sharing expertise about neurobiology with her peers. I was like, we didn't even get to the neurobio unit yet in class. And it's just been really cool in that respect. So we also have an advisory program at my school. So every teacher has between 6 and 8 or so students for which they're the advisor. And we meet about 20 minutes a day, normally 3 to 4 days a week. And there to support academically, but also socially and emotionally. I'm currently a 10th grade advisor. We've got a few students who are in that sort of rebellious stage, a bunch of boys, and they're really pushing back on a lot of things. Why do I need to learn this? Why do I have to be here on time? Why do I have to adhere to the dress code? And they just push back on every single thing. It's not uncommon. But one of the neat things is that we have the freedom and flexibility to address those kinds of things in any format we want. There's no official curriculum for our advisory, so it's up to sort of the individual needs of the student. So I listened to this great podcast where I heard this philosopher and professor at Georgia Tech, Dr. Ian Bogost, and he's actually a video game designer. He's been doing that for 20 years, but he's also a professor of business and philosophy. So really dynamic, interesting guy. He wrote this book called Play Anything. And the whole premise of it is that, this idea of fun that we have in our society says like things are supposed to be easy and then they're fun. But his whole thing is like when it comes to games, and of course he has interest in video games, that, we take this seemingly like random thing and all of a sudden we impose restrictions, we make rules. And all of a sudden by following the rules, it's a challenge and then we have fun in the process. So they said, for instance, a soccer field, a bunch of grass, kind of meaningless, not to everyone, but stroll around, whatever. But all of a sudden you paint some lines, put some goals, give them a ball, and that is soccer. We have this construct in our minds of what that looks like. And so, but if people don't play by the rules, somebody just grabs a ball and just heads for the goal, like what fun is that? So what I'm working with the students now is we're investigating some of this reading. And actually, as soon as I heard the podcast, I emailed this professor. And of course, he does public speaking stuff, and his website says, if I don't get back to you, sorry, etc. He emailed me back in like 10 minutes. I was like, I like this guy. So he sent me some shorter writings and some YouTube clips and some Wired and TED Talks and stuff like that he's done recently. And so I investigate some of that with my students. Now they're like, all right, we want to read this book. Let's talk about this more. And so I've got plans like we're going to investigate it, maybe do an assembly for our school and what we learned from the process. And I'm hoping that these students really get like, hey, I'm here at school, I've got to be here, like there's some things maybe I don't like, but those are the rules, those are parameters. And how can I make this a fun experience by challenging myself, but at the same time, getting the most out of it while I'm here. So again, it's those students just being willing to say, all right, Mr. Trump, I'll try it, why not? Let's see what happens. So just being thankful for those teachers, those students who go out there, they share, they're willing to try new things. And it's actually interesting. So when I was thinking about, after you asked me to be on Friend Friday, I was like, oh, like I love Matt Fratt. He's a sharer. That's what he does. And, that's Ed Camp. That's what he's all about. And I was like, I've gone to a bunch of Ed Camps. I've organized Ed Camp leadership in my local area. I didn't help out a whole lot with Ed Camp Creative online, but I was there to participate in everything.
I'll tell you that.
Right. So I was like, I just need to do more. What can I do? So you've inspired me, Matt. I just started today. I put together a blog. I'm going to start writing. I'm like, what format? It doesn't matter what format it takes. If you're putting stuff out there, you're sharing. It doesn't matter if it's one teacher that hears it, one student that reads something. You might have helped that teacher or student. It's that whole like starfish story. Have you heard that one? Yeah, it's like matters to that one, right? So yeah, so it's inspiring. I'm glad to see what you're doing here, Matt, with your videos and everything. And I think the more that people are willing to share, the better off we're going to be as teachers.
You nailed it. Like I vlog every day, and if more than 3 people watch, I'm doing it, and I get 10, 15, and that doesn't even matter. I mean, it's great that ideas are getting out there, but just the act of this, like, is making relationships. doing something, ritually and regularly, the hustling of it, something good's going to happen sometime. So I'm totally down with the sharing thing. Matthew, I am so grateful. And I'll end on, one of the reasons why I really like Matt, and Matthew, we've met like twice, but I'm a sucker, Matthew, I'm a sucker for people who like to talk to strangers. I think it's a very high socio-emotional skill. And that's what I do at conferences. Some people at conferences, how they like stay in their little group. I'm like, why did you travel 200 miles to have lunch with the same? So when I'm at a conference, I'm an all-out talk to strangers. And one of two things happens. Either like you and I, we had a lovely conversation, and which led on to a collegial relationship later, or it's like high school, and I'm not cool enough for that.
Right.
So it's usually, and then there's like this middle ground where you just some pleasantries. But anyway, so and I really, and it happens a lot, and I'm so grateful, Matthew. Thank you so much. Follow him on Twitter. It's Matthew P. Trump. It's at Matthew P. Trump. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.